What they also found, tragically, was that DJ had also been stabbed upstairs 12 times.
This was a huge news-breaking story, and people in Lincolnshire must have been terrified.
Police at the scene are given clear indications that there is one suspect involved in the shocking slayings of mother and son, ex-partner, 29-year-old Daniel Bolton. But he is nowhere to be seen.
And of course, what we know at this point is that Bolton has made his escape. Louth in Lincolnshire is a really lovely market town. It's literally surrounded by the countryside. If you're thinking about wanting to bring up children, it's that perfect environment. Louth is like most places. It has crime, it's got youth crime, it's got certain problems, it's got domestic abuse, like we'd expect to see across the board. But it's not a high crime area because it is genuinely a beautiful market town.
Yeah, it's Lincolnshire sort of hidden away on the east side of England. It's mostly flat, but the Wolds is a beautiful area. And Louth itself is a well-to-do, quiet place. Nowhere really you would expect the murder of a mother and child in the safety of their own home. It must have come as a serious, serious shock to this nice area, full of nice people who thought they were living in a nice, safe place.
The two young girls had bravely called 999 after seeing a man later identified as Bethany Vincent's ex-partner Daniel Bolton forcing his way into her home.
You can imagine the scene as the police entered the house with the door gaping to see Bethany stretched out on the floor, covered in blood, and Bolton and Bethany's 9-month-old baby crawling around, clearly distressed, knowing violence had taken place to her own mother.
Her 9-month-old child is next to her, basically in a situation of distress, and clearly they go and look in the other rooms to see whether the perpetrator's still there, and they find DJ, who's been horrifically attacked.
Bethany had been stabbed multiple times. In fact, it was 9 times. One particularly fatal stab wound to the heart, which is, unimaginable for anyone to think about.
The truth is, the violence and the blunt force trauma that she endured demonstrates that this was not a crime of passion in a moment. This was a protracted, drawn-out assault for several minutes.
Tragic scene, and officers that went to that scene said that was the most traumatic scene that they had ever been to.
Police are entering the golden hour of investigation. They need to officially identify the victims, then move quickly to apprehend a dangerous perpetrator at large.
Part of the role of a police officer is to deliver what's called a death message. And this is something you never really forget. You're bursting into someone's life as a police officer, knocking on that door and explaining to them that somebody in their life has died. And when you think of what you're telling them in this particular circumstance, it's not natural causes, it's not because of age, it's not because somebody's expecting it. It's a death which has been caused in the most horrendous and tragic circumstance. And the officers, I'm sure, will have found that incredibly difficult, but the most important people here are the family.
It's almost impossible to compute how it would be answering the door and having police officers standing there, because automatically anybody knows that they're going to deliver really terrible news. But Bethany's family know that probably the likely reason why they're stood there is because something terrible has happened to Bethany. I don't think for one moment they could have imagined that they were going to be faced with the news that it was Bethany and DJ who'd been murdered. And ultimately, your life dissolves. Everything that you ever knew will never be the same. The future that you hoped for will never exist. And you'll spend eternity, essentially, trying to put back the pieces of your life that have been decimated by these kind of experiences.
As the police investigate the scene, they rescue Bethany and Bolton's 9-month-old baby. They then call in forensics.
Officers will then call in to say what they have found. A double murder at that particular time. Specialist crime scene officers will come in for the forensics. Murder teams will come and do the CCTV trawling. But also there will be other officers, the uniform officers, searching for the suspect, searching for Bolton.
29-year-old prime suspect Daniel Bolton has fled the scene.
As Bolton leaves the house, having killed both DJ and Bethany, he is seen by a member of the public again.
There was a witness who saw Daniel Bolton calmly walking down the street smoking a cigarette.
As though this was a normal thing that had happened. And he turned to that person and says, somebody needs to call the emergency services because somebody has been stabbed in there. You know, that kind of very scary, kind of callous, but also calm personality that he was showing at that time, you know, is the signs of an incredibly dangerous individual.
The police are obviously very concerned about the fact that there is a very violent offender on the loose. They know that he's responsible for a double homicide.
So they will want to look at the CCTV as quickly as possible to try and work out in which direction Bolton has left the scene.
When a violent offender is stressed, they become more violent on the whole. So he's an imminent threat to anybody who may challenge him.
As a senior investigating officer, you have to make decisions sometimes about using the press and using the public to try and find somebody. You don't want people approaching somebody that is as dangerous as Bolton. But equally, you need the eyes and the ears of the public to find out where he is, if you've seen him, so that officers can direct their inquiries towards that area. And of course, that's what they did. They had to go public because they wanted to find him as quickly as possible. He posed a danger to everybody, every member of the public. Now we're into what is called a manhunt, and it will be a very high-profile manhunt. They know that.
They put out information about who they are looking for in an aid to get somebody to say that they've seen him. But obviously, they don't want the public to try to approach him because it could be incredibly dangerous. This man will happily kill you if you get in his way.
On the 31st of May 2021, on a quiet evening in the small town of Louth in Lincolnshire, England, an extremely aggressive Daniel Bolton kicks down the door of Bethany Vincent's house and brutally murders both Bethany and her 9-year-old son, DJ.
Bethany Vincent was daughter to Caroline and Darren. They came from a really close family. Growing up, she was absolutely adored.
She was a loved daughter in a loving family, hardworking parents, and a nice family unit. In her teens, she had a relationship with a young man called Henson, and when she became pregnant at 16, they were both delighted, and her parents were delighted.
As is the case with a lot of young love, it didn't go the distance. But in spite of that, they had a really good relationship. And I think that, again, is testament to somebody with really good morals and ethics and a really good foundation of support.
She was said to be a very loving and caring mother, loved the people around her who loved her too. She was a really good mum to her son.
DJ was absolutely adored. He had some complexities. He was autistic and he had issues communicating, but genuinely, he lit up every room and the family adored him.
He had a fantastic gift for numbers and dates. You could ask him any date in time, say 13th of February 1984, and he would tell you immediately what day of the week it was. He was just a cracking kid.
She was devoted as a mother. That's what people say about Bethany, that one of the things that stands out about her is that her primary role and goal in life was to be the perfect mother, and she was.
Kira was very active in looking after DJ. They were co-parenting. She was a very loving mother. and her friends adored her. So she was just trying to get on with her normal life in circumstances which everybody finds themselves in.
Clearly, Kieran was very invested and involved in DJ's life. That meant that she had a level of freedom to her life. So she went out and she had fun, she partied, she enjoyed hanging out socially.
She was a fun-loving person. So perhaps, arriving as she did in her mid-20s, she was still hoping that maybe she'd find someone in love, and was on the dating website Tinder. She came across a picture of a man whose face she liked, and she made the decision to swipe right. That was a fatal decision, because that man was Daniel Bolton.
Daniel Bolton is somebody that I believe was just born bad. I think some people are born with a predisposition of malevolence, and he ticks all the boxes.
Daniel Bolton was a disturbed man, no question. He had a very bad upbringing. He was brought up by his father, who was a drunk.
Bolton's life before he met Bethany was very checkered. He was known to mental health services way back to 2004.
Heavy drinker, a heavy gambler. He had a fierce temper. He had a string of convictions, and he was consumed by rage and jealousy.
Bolton had a criminal history involving assault on multiple police officers. He was involved in armed robberies, and he was involved in very abusive relationships with women in the past.
So we're talking about a pattern of behaviour that from the get-go is deeply concerning. And arguably, he was not safe to be around women.
When you're assaulting 5 different police officers, this person is a real concern for our society, really.
Crucially, Bethany was unaware of Daniel Bolton's previous relationships or abusive behaviour. She was unable to see the red flags.
When you think about dating in the digital age, everybody has a profile and a bio. You don't write, have a history of violence. You write the things that make you seem nice. So for somebody who's got a horrible pitted history, you can essentially whitewash that and carve yourself out to be Mr. Charming.
He can hide a multitude of things behind a profile. Also, they can get close quite quickly and then feel like they're in a safe relationship when actually they haven't even met. It gives that false sense of security.
Bethany thought she'd really had stumbled upon a keeper, on a golden guy. Everything she thought, that he was attentive, he was there, he was interested in her family and her life, and he seemed to be the one.
She starts a relationship with him. They seem to be in a good place. And in August of 2020, they actually have a child together. And everyone describes them at that time as being a good couple and very pleased that she had another child.
It was a short-lived honeymoon period.
Daniel Bolton, like every coercive controller, like every domestic abuser, love bombs. He makes her feel like the most important person in the world. He makes her feel like she's met Mr. Right.
Very quickly, this golden start started to crumble, because Bethany quickly realised that what the attention that Bolton was paying her was in fact based on obsessional demand to dominate her, moving her away from her lovely stable family with her parents, moving her away from her lovely friends so that he could have her to himself. It was just Bolton and Bethany in his eyes.
Bolton had spent a lot of time with Bethany, almost showing signs of this coercive and controlling behaviour. And he became very jealous of her first child, DJ. DJ has autism and requires additional help and needs, and a lot of attention from his mum, Bethany.
It's extremely common for domestic abusers to be jealous of a child.
Bolton was consumed by jealousy of Bethany's happy life with her parents, happy life with her other friends, and happy life with, in Bolton's eyes, someone else's child. And the focus of his jealousy was fixed on this poor 9-year-old boy.
Bolton showed huge amounts of jealousy throughout the relationship and even afterwards. He seemed to be jealous of her job, jealous of her family, jealous of her son, jealous of anything that meant that he didn't have that control. He was so jealous of DJ, so jealous of Bethany's relationships that he completely closed her world down.
He feels that he needs to be the most important person in her world, and therefore he sees him as a threat. So ultimately, DJ becomes a problem that needs to be removed.
Bolton considered DJ the outsider and the threat to his single-minded obsessional possession of Bethany was this child whom Bethany, of course, doted on. And he was convinced that DJ's autism didn't exist at all, and that the problems associated with autism was just deliberately made up by DJ to attract attention.
Shortly before the country goes into lockdown in 2020 due to the coronavirus, Bethany discovers she is pregnant with Daniel Bolton's baby. Far from this bringing the young family closer together, it seems to intensify Bolton's dominant and unpredictable behaviour.
It must have seemed to her that this would cement the relationship and calm Bolton down. In fact, it was completely opposite. Bolton thought that this new baby should be the number one priority.
It seemed to give Bolton this greater sense of power within the household. He even thought at one point that DJ, who had autism, could pass that on to the child that he and Bethany had. A ridiculous concept, but this was things that were going round in his mind.
On one hand, he's saying DJ's faking the autism. On the other, he's saying that he's a danger to their new child because he has autism. So he can't win. This innocent little boy cannot win.
He actually said to Bethany, why don't you get rid of DJ?
Send him away or give him to somebody else. I mean, that concept to a mother who's been looking after her child is very difficult for most people to comprehend, but it shows the level of jealousy and the level of hatred that he was showing towards a child at that particular stage in their relationship.
He even starts talking about things like wishing him dead, feeling that ultimately if he wasn't there, they wouldn't have a problem. The fact that he wants to destroy the relationship between Bethany and her son, as opposed to help it become even stronger, that is the mark of a very jealous individual, a very weak mindset, and somebody who has a malevolent intent.
The 26-year-old single mother of two, Bethany Vincent, is becoming increasingly concerned around her relationship with partner Daniel Bolton. In turn, Bolton is becoming jealous of Bethany's 9-year-old son, DJ, as well as abusive and controlling of Bethany herself.
Bolton's relationship with Bethany deteriorated very quickly. He would stop her from seeing people, even made her quit her job.
To give up her job, she lost a lot of that independence, and that further isolated her, and she was then all his. Gaslighting the victim and saying things to make them lose their confidence and to really put them down is a real common trait of these domestic abusers, because it means that they can further isolate them if they start to lose confidence, start to lose weight, maybe aren't able to work anymore. So it all plays into that controlling, jealous behaviour, that isolation tactic, and it really is manipulative.
Bethany's family and friends are understandably horrified at the way that she's being treated. They see that she's getting isolated. They see that she's not going out anywhere near as much and socialising. They're seeing that he's chipping away at her self-esteem bit by bit to a point where she's almost not knowing who she is any longer.
It can be really difficult, I think, for parents to be able to say to their children, their grown-up children, actually, I think this person might not be right for you, and be able to label things as well as coercively controlling. or even dangerous.
There were quite a few occasions where people saw Daniel Bolton being aggressive towards Bethany, but her mother actually saw him throw her against the wall. So she's witnessed a really high-level assault. So they are clearly desperate for her to get away. But it's never as simple. When you're in a relationship, the person that you're in a domestically abusive relationship with, they're not domestically abusive 100% of the time. They might only be domestically abusive and nasty 5% of the time. So for 95% of the time, they might be fine. And if you have a family with them, you're thinking, well, maybe it can work out if I do A, B, or C. And you mess around with that in your mind a great deal as a victim. So that's why she stays, even though we all know, ideally, she should leave as soon as possible.
Someone is prepared to assault their girlfriend in front of the girlfriend's mum, a family member, it means that they are prepared to do anything. Domestic abuse is extremely prevalent. We lose around 100 women a year. It's about every week 2 or 3 women are lost to murder via their partner or ex-partner, and then we have to add on suicides as well.
After suffering 2 years of physical and emotional abuse, it's time now that Bethany says, well, I've got to stop this, and she goes to the police to obtain a restraining order against Bolton. A restraining order puts constraints on people. It's a very, very powerful piece of legislation and a powerful piece of paper to stop somebody coming near you, harassing you, whatever the circumstances of the case are.
When you think about Bethany's situation, she was so convinced that something terrible could happen to her and her family that she needed to essentially go into hiding, and that's what was going to happen. She was not far away from being rehoused in a place where he wouldn't be able to find her. Unfortunately, it feels as if he gets wind of this and he finds out that that's the plan, and ultimately that knowledge is what seals her doom.
When we look at people separating, because separation is such a high risk factor and is the time when we see a lot of harm or murders, we talk to people about leaving safely, and that would mean ensuring that the offender doesn't know that you're going to leave them.
Bolton was being housed in a hostel at the Salvation Army, some miles away. All the money he could lay his hands on was being spent mostly on drink, but on drugs as well. It was difficult to see how he could possibly be reintegrated into any family situation.
Bethany is now to move to a undisclosed location, supported by the police and local authority and courts, somewhere where Bolton will not be able to find her, not be able to contact her. And this is also known to other people as well, friends who know and are trying to support her through these terrible times.
Now, you can imagine just how seriously the police must have been worried about the level of impending violence. She thought for the first time, I've got a chance of getting out of this with my children to a safe place.
But unfortunately, before she even makes it to that location, Bolton finds out about this plan and starts bombarding her with more and more messages.
What we see is Bolton sticking to the behaviour that we've seen prior to this, which is bombarding her with lots of messages, begging for her to take him back, saying that he can't go on without her.
He was stalking her, bombarding her with 900 text messages. It takes time to send 900 text messages, and that is a choice to do that and to stalk someone. Now, 900 messages tells me fixated, obsessed, and a stalker, but that is an absolute bombardment and will terrify her.
And she ignores every single one of them. What Bethany does, which is often what other people don't do in these situations, is that she actually follows protocol, which is to ignore every message, to not engage in any way, shape or form. So she's doing everything right, but this is really riling him because he's not getting the consequence that he wants, which is for her to say, okay, I'll give you another chance.
It can be quite dangerous to block them completely, because that's when they're more likely to show up. The advice is to ensure you keep one route of comms open. You don't reply to them. You've already said, do not contact me, and the CPS like to see that. But keeping one route of comms where they think they're getting to you, A, it keeps the evidence, but B, it can prevent the escalation. Now, the escalation starts when they are completely blocked and they can't get to that victim. So they're more likely to just try and turn up.
After messaging Bethany over 900 times and receiving zero response, Bolton, in a fit of rage, leaves the hostel and begins a 26-mile walk to Bethany's home.
And then we see him, this is at night, getting himself together and just leaving the homeless shelter and starting to walk. And essentially walks miles and miles and miles to Bethany's house with clearly an intention to show her that he's so devastated, he's got a rope with him. He's got this rope that therefore he's going to say, I'm going to take my own life. But with respect, he has a lot of time during that journey to go and do that if that's what he wants to do. It isn't, it's a prop. It's seriously about making her feel guilty. By the time he arrives at Bethany's house, he's so pumped with this rage, this jealousy, this anger, this aggression, that really the danger is at such boiling point that it's inescapable, something terrible is going to happen to her.
And this is where tragedy strikes. At 8 p.m. on the 31st of May 2021, Daniel Bolton forces his way into Bethany Vincent's flat, stabs both Bethany and her 9-year-old son DJ to death, then flees the scene before police arrive.
One of the big problems in this situation is that actually the neighbours get really used to Daniel Bolton just turning up, hammering on the door, demanding to be let in. To them, that's actually something that happens so regularly that they don't even feel that concerned when he comes and turns up. But what we all know from the outside looking in and recognising what plays out in this crime is that this is building up to a point where he's going to explode. This is building up to a point where if he doesn't get his own way, then he's going to create the ultimate scenario so that no one else can ever have the woman that he pretends he loves.
The police make the decision to alert the media to Bolton's escape in an effort to broaden their search. It's imperative for everyone's safety that he is caught.
Understandably, at this point, there's a massive manhunt because it's now made the national news that this poor woman and her son have been murdered brutally, and everyone is interested in bringing him to justice as soon as possible. The police in all locations locally are on the lookout.
The tactics they wanted was to use the media, use the public to say, right, where is he? Help us find him. This is what he's done. He's very dangerous.
I think police knew that the public would help. Also, they had to warn the public that a double murderer was on the loose. And this was a huge story in Lincolnshire, where a double murderer was on the loose, probably armed. Definitely, he was desperate.
The night that Bolton killed Bethany and DJ, he spent the night in an empty bungalow that he broke into.
He didn't know whether people were present or otherwise. And so that tells you that he would have been happy to attack another person. Then he rests, obviously, thinks about what he's going to do next, equips himself and carries on going.
He left a note confessing in his own name to the double murders, but he was still on the run.
So at this point, they haven't got hold of somebody that they know is absolutely dangerous beyond measure.
After hiding from police overnight, Daniel Bolton continues his escape from police detection.
When he leaves that bungalow and goes out into the public, that he is then spotted, in fact, by an off-duty police officer.
Who immediately recognised him and, of course, tried to arrest him.
PC Stephen Dennis is off duty and walking his dog near Hubbard Hills the morning after the double murder, a mere 1.7 miles from Bethany's home. It is here that he encounters Bolton.
PC Stephen Dennis actually notes that Bolton is talking to a woman. Now, clearly, that could be putting this woman at risk. So he calls for backup, and then basically he goes and challenges this offender. He does what we expect the best police officers to do, which is, in spite of not being on the job, he feels it's his duty to get involved, and he makes chase to confront him.
And he is challenged at that point, and a chase ensues where the officer chases after Bolton.
Bolton was an extremely violent man with a string of convictions. These involved attacks on 5 separate occasions on police officers.
He's armed, he's dangerous, and he is happy, as we've seen in his past, to take on a police officer.
The officer actually is stabbed during the course of that chase.
Stephen Dennis is very quick to move and dodge the actual slings.
Bolton was armed and stabbed the officer in the leg.
The officer is trying to contact the police and alerting them that he is chasing the person that everybody is looking for. Now, Bolton is somebody that now has stabbed a police officer, having just murdered a child and a mother. He is extremely dangerous. So they know what kind of person they're dealing with. They deploy armed officers. More and more cops from further and further away would want to be part of finding this person. And you know, I can imagine how many police officers were making their way to that scene to try and find him.
But undeterred, Bolton makes a run for it, and he actually tries to get a vehicle. He opens the doors, there's a man, a woman and a child in there, and fortunately the male in this situation waves his arms, and it kind of makes Bolton think twice, so he carries on. Again, as he's running, he comes to another car. A woman is driving this particular vehicle, but she thinks as she pulls up, this guy looks like he's going to come for my car. She locks the doors, but she's right. He tries to get the vehicle because he wants to make his escape, but again, he's unsuccessful.
The police focused their attention there. There was a police helicopter, there were drones, the place was swarming.
Bolton ditches the cars and makes a run for a nearby farmhouse. He hops over the farmhouse fence and runs towards the surrounding woods. Police helicopters catch his attempted escape on their CCTV.
Bolton is now in the woods, and there are police drones, helicopters, armed officers, unarmed officers. Everybody is there to try and find him.
You can see his eyes darting around, desperately for a means of escape, but even he must have known then that the game was up. He was cornered.
And he is confronted in the woods where he actually asked to be shot by the police. We want this person alive, and we want them because we want them to face justice on behalf of that family.
Essentially, he's tasered because he's going to have his day in court, whether he likes it or not.
He was then restrained in handcuffs and brought out of the woods, which can be seen on the footage. As Bolton is being put in the back of a police van in handcuffs, he says, "I know I'm an evil person."
He told one officer, "I know I'm an evil but can you give me some water?"
Can you get me some water, please? I know I'm an evil.
He also suggests to the officers there that he's going to kill himself. The important thing there is to make sure that he doesn't do anything to harm himself, because everybody at that point wants him to face justice for killing Bethany, for killing DJ, and for everything else he's done in his life.
On the 31st of May 2021, Bethany Vincent and her 9-year-old son DJ are both stabbed to death by her abusive ex-partner Daniel Bolton. After committing this heinous crime, Bolton goes on the run. He is found 24 hours later by an off-duty police officer who alerts the authorities and has him arrested.
Bolton himself is a crime scene, and he's an important crime scene, obviously, because you want to put him at the scene of the murder of Bethany and DJ. We have witnesses, but they don't know him personally, and it's important to link him forensically to that scene. Coming back into custody, his clothes would be taken, they would be forensically examined at a later date. They'd be taking swabs and fingernail cuttings and hair cuttings and all sorts of things from him to try and find that forensic link to the victims and the crime scene itself. The officers will be making sure that they have got every piece of evidence they can find, every piece of CCTV that can prove the case against Bolton. There's lots and lots of work involving lots and lots of officers, all with that common purpose to get justice for Bethany, for DJ and the rest of the family.
Trial took place at Lincoln Crown Court, and then, to general astonishment, Bolton entered pleas of not guilty to both murder charges, and he even denied wounding the police officer and burglary of the house.
Again, with the evidence against him, the forensic evidence, his admissions on a note about that he did the killings, he still says, "I am not guilty."
His intention now is to get away with it. And the best way to get away with something is to try to suggest that you just were not in your right mind.
After initially pleading not guilty, Bolton's legal team persuade him to take a more realistic approach, and he pleads guilty to manslaughter.
And he changed his plea to still maintaining not guilty to murder, but pleading guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility.
Because he says that his mental health plays a part in what he did and he had no control, essentially.
It's inescapable for him that he carried out the attack. What he's trying to do is escape the responsibility of it being considered murder.
He said that his damaged upbringing was responsible for what was known as a dissocial personality disorder, and that even though he had carried out the crimes, he was not responsible for them because of his mental state.
Thus meaning he's going to get a way lighter sentence. As you'd imagine in court, he doesn't have a lot of emotion, because ultimately, if you're going down this line of defence, you're trying to say I wasn't responsible. If you're not responsible, well, how can you feel that guilty about it? It's so disrespectful.
But this again is tested. You know, they will test that to say, is he in full control? Did he have rational thought? And it was decided that he did. And he was found guilty of the murder of Bethany and of DJ.
When the jury came back, and they came back quickly, it was a guilty verdict. And essentially that was because the prosecution had an incredibly strong case. Unfortunately, it means that Bethany and DJ at least got some justice.
There was no possible example of a man suddenly losing control. This was a planned attack for a man who loved violence and wanted revenge against his ex-girlfriend who was trying to dump him, and what he saw as his nemesis, a 9-year-old boy, autistic and completely harmless.
Bolton was given 2 life sentences where he would serve a minimum term of 40 years. And that means that he isn't eligible for parole until 40 years have been completed.
The sentence for me is interesting. I genuinely think that this is a person who should never walk the streets again, and I feel that there was enough compelling evidence that could have been suggested that he would never be a safe person to be free. Essentially, the judge said that they had explored that, and that maybe a full life tariff could have been on the table, but they believed that because he had walked that distance and was bombarding her with lots of messages, it was all about their relationship carrying on, that he couldn't in good faith believe that he was intending to murder Bethany. Personally, if he hadn't intended to murder Bethany, Bethany and DJ would still be alive.
The judge also took the unusual step of excusing each member of the jury from further jury service for another 5 years on the grounds that the horrific details that they'd had to sit and listen to and pass judgment on were so upsetting that they should not be subjected to another trial.
Where Bethany is concerned, and her family is concerned, there is very little else they could have done. He was a danger to women, to police officers, and clearly therefore to children. And unfortunately, that information didn't get passed down to Bethany before she made the decisions that she did to be in a relationship with this man. Maybe that's what Tinder profiles should come with, a check on the background of these kind of individuals.
Domestic abuse is the great unsolved crime of our time, often behind closed doors with no one even aware of it.
Education around healthy relationships is a must for schools covering domestic abuse, coercive control, looking at the red flags, looking at what does a healthy relationship look like? It's quintessential to have it in early education, again in secondary education, and then at universities.
For me personally, it doesn't matter whether you classify Bolton as a sociopath or a psychopath or just say that he's got antisocial personality disorder. He is a stone cold-blooded killer. He's an individual who doesn't understand empathy. He's got a low regard for anybody else's life. He doesn't care about consequences. He's an individual who's predatory in nature. He seeks to exploit. It's all about him.
And then he has a jealousy over a 10-year-old boy who has autism. Jealousy that he wasn't getting the attention that he needed from Bethany. And it's just pushed him even further, this personality trait that he has, to commit the most heinous of crimes in murdering Bethany and DJ.
And ultimately, that jealousy is what has led him to murder Bethany and give him the ultimate in power and control. He is a really cruel, violent man who got the sentence he deserved.
Bethany's family are doing exactly what you'd expect Bethany's family to do. They're creating a loving legacy by raising her child that now does not have a mother, that now will never remember the loving arms of a woman who adored that child. So the one thing that we know is that that child is in safe hands, denied a brother, denied a mother, but fortunately drenched in the love of a family that no longer have the capacity to love Bethany and DJ in an open way as they should be able to. Instead, it's all directed towards that child, which means they'll grow up in a beautiful place with beautiful people. Bethany and DJ lived as they died, loving each other. They were a united, connected family. She was devoted to him and he was devoted to her. He was a special little boy with a special family who adored every inch of his being. And whilst it's sickening and saddening and terrifying to imagine that people like this are killed in such horrific ways, the only comfort I take from it is that I believe that both of them are together and together in a far better place. Together in a far better place that somebody like Bolton will never have the privilege of seeing.